Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we don't just crack open a source list. We take what seems like an impenetrable wall of information, controversy, and, decades of noise, and we find the core truths buried within.
And today we're not simply looking at an unsolved murder. We are examining the origin story of the modern true crime phenomenon itself.
Right.
This case is not just unresolved, it is a national Rorschach test. It reflects these deep fissures in American society, in class, investigative procedure, and the media. This is the enduring, agonizing story of the JonBenét Ramsey murder.
Our mission today, for you, our listener, is to act as your expert guides.
Right.
We need to cut through, almost 30 years of sensational headlines, tabloid gossip, and outright myth-making.
Yeah, a lot of myth-making.
We are going to focus rigorously on the complex, often contradictory evidence, the specific forensic failures that crippled the investigation from the very start, and the deep sociological anxieties this case reflects. We're here to uncover those essential insights and those frustrating but vital aha moments that keep this mystery alive.
And the scene itself is just so crucial because it immediately established the conflict that would define the case. You have to think about Boulder, Colorado, Christmas 1996.
Right. Not a place you'd expect this.
No, not at all. This was a wealthy university town, a low-crime enclave where the idea of an intruder felt like a distant, almost irrelevant threat. Specifically, we're focused on a sprawling 3-story Tudor home, one filled with the recent debris of holiday joy. This wasn't just a crime, it was a dual violation. A violation of a child and of the sanctified, the private space of the upper-class American home.
That's a great point. The very idea that horror could penetrate that level of security and affluence was, and I think it remains, terrifying to the American public.
Absolutely.
And the clock starts ticking the moment that affluence and security are just shattered. Our initial snapshot centers on the 552 AM 911 call on December 26, 1996.
Right, the morning after Christmas.
This is when Patsy Ramsey, reportedly hysterical, alerts authorities not to a body, but to a kidnapping. The central, bizarre piece of evidence found that morning, resting on the spiral staircase, was the ransom note.
An unprecedented 2.5-page, utterly theatrical demand for money.
Yes. The mystery began not with a body in the basement, but with an utterly confusing, almost fictionalized text on the main floor.
And that bizarre text and the ensuing chaotic reaction instantly shattered the image of the perfect, affluent family. It morphed this single tragic event into a modern American myth that we continue to consume and debate today.
Okay, we've set the scene. Let's now zero in on the exact moment everything fractured.
So we're moving into the context of that night, December 25th, 1996, and the morning of the 26th. To understand why this tragedy became a media obsession, we have to talk about JonBenét herself.
Exactly. The sources highlight that the immediate media attention wasn't just about the crime, it was about the victim's public image. I mean, JonBenét was 6 years old, a former Little Miss Colorado. When the pageant videos were released, the imagery of her world, the shimmer of sequins, the pageant crowns, the polished performance that felt, slightly beyond the boundaries of childhood innocence, it created an immediate, feverish, and prurient public fascination.
And that's the visual hook the media needed, isn't it? That image, the child beauty queen, instantly forced a confrontation with the uncomfortable topic of the sexualization of young girls and the competitive boundaries of performance parenting.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
It allowed the public and the press to subtly critique the family's lifestyle and choices before any evidence was even analyzed. The tragedy was immediately filtered through this cultural lens.
But the real historical fracture wasn't cultural. It was investigative. It happened in the hours following that 911 call, and it created the fatal flaw that means this case will likely remain contested forever. We need to detail the events of December 26th, the longest day.
The critical error that stands out in every source, every single criminological analysis, happened in the immediate aftermath of the initial call. The house was being treated as a kidnapping scene.
Meaning they assumed the victim was gone.
Exactly. They assumed she was out of the house. And as a result, in a truly fateful decision that would forever taint the investigation, friends and family were allowed to enter the home.
It's mind-boggling. They walked through what should have been a pristine crime scene.
They did. They contaminated evidence, they potentially moved things, they touched surfaces, and they allowed crucial forensic information to be lost within hours. This single decision, or maybe lack of procedure, is cited globally in criminology as a textbook example of how not to secure a crime scene.
It's an investigative failure of catastrophic proportions.
It really is. And that failure led directly to the shocking discovery. Hours passed. The police still believed the girl was out of the house. Then, around 1:00 p.m., a detective suggested to John Ramsey that he should perform a systematic search, just in case.
Let's just pause on that for a second, because the lack of urgency is truly breathtaking.
It is.
A detective had to ask the father to check the house again, nearly 7 hours after the 911 call, when police were already on the scene.
And John Ramsey proceeds to search a dark, little-used basement room, a windowless wine cellar that had been secured by a latch. And that's where he discovered JonBenét's body.
The finding itself just added layers of horror and confusion.
Yes. She was wrapped in a white blanket, her mouth was covered with duct tape, and a homemade garrote constructed from a paintbrush handle and cord was found around her neck.
And the official cause of death speaks to the complexity of the crime. Asphyxia by strangulation associated with craniocerebral trauma.
So she was hit severely in the head, causing a potentially fatal injury, and then strangled with the garrote.
2 distinct mechanisms of death, which suggests either 2 separate acts or, and this is key, a staging to cover up the initial injury.
And while the crime scene was being irreversibly contaminated, the sources highlight a deeper, systemic problem that ensured the case would never move forward cohesively: the institutional discord.
Okay, so we're talking about the friction between the Boulder County District Attorney's Office, which was led by Alex Hunter, and the Boulder Police Department.
Right. The police felt they were on the track of the family covering up a crime almost immediately, but the DA's office was hesitant. Very hesitant.
And what's fascinating here is that the problems weren't just about police inexperience, but about outright conflict of distrust between the 2 agencies. This tension, it just crippled the investigation.
It did. Hunter famously refused to sign off on an arrest warrant for the Ramseys, even as the police were pushing hard.
Why? I mean, what was the philosophical barrier there?
Hunter believed, correctly in a legal sense, that the bar for an arrest warrant probable cause was lower than the bar for a successful conviction in court, which is beyond a reasonable doubt. So given the contaminated crime scene, the bizarre ransom note, and the intense media scrutiny, Hunter felt they just couldn't present a case that would result in a unanimous conviction. He argued he wouldn't win.
So instead of a cohesive investigation, you had the police gathering evidence pointing toward RDI Ramsey's did it, while the prosecutor's office was essentially saying, the case is tainted, we cannot proceed.
Exactly. This fracture created a massive vacuum. The professional agencies were paralyzed, and the public and the media rushed in to fill that void with speculation and, half-truths.
And all the while, the Ramseys, they immediately retreat behind a wall of powerful legal and PR teams, turning the whole dynamic into an adversarial legal battle from day one.
And that institutional tension became a source of public mistrust and the engine of the eternal cold case.
That institutional chaos is such a critical starting point. Let's now transition to the actual physical evidence that makes this case so maddeningly illogical. We'll zero in on the great contradictions, the 2 pieces of evidence that most defy easy explanation: the note and the pineapple.
We absolutely must begin with the ransom note anomaly because it is arguably the case's most bizarre and central contradiction.
Yeah, the length and sheer theatricality of this document completely defy the logic of a genuine, functional kidnapping attempt. At 2.5 pages long, the sources confirm it is, to this day, the longest ransom note ever recorded in FBI history.
Think about that. A real kidnapper wants brevity, clarity, speed. This note reads like a script written by someone with far, far too much time.
And that script had specific internal links that pointed directly back to the family. It was written on Passy Ramsey's legal-sized notepad, which is found inside the home.
And the pen used was reportedly returned to its holder nearby.
Right. This physical connection immediately linked the writing and the staging of the kidnapping to someone inside the house.
But the detail that truly cemented the internal link was the demand itself. The note demanded the strangely precise sum of $118,000.
And it wasn't a nice round million or $50,000. It was oddly specific. And the source material reveals this amount matched John Ramsey's recent Christmas bonus almost to the dollar.
Wow, so think about the implications of that. If this was an external kidnapper, how did they know that exact non-public figure? This suggests intimate knowledge of the Ramseys' financial affairs.
And then the language of the note is it's bizarre, it's literate, even quoting lines from classic films like Dirty Harry and Speed. One line, "Don't call the police," mirrored a line from Dirty Harry, almost verbatim.
So this leaves us with a fundamental dilemma. Was this the work of a highly eccentric, literate intruder who somehow had hours to spend inside a family's home, finding their stationery and pen, writing a 2.5-page document, and knowing the exact amount of the father's bonus?
Or was it a panicked, fictionalized staging by someone inside the house trying, badly, to craft a believable kidnapping narrative using tropes they recognize from pop culture? The length and the internal details powerfully suggest the latter.
And if that note wasn't enough to tangle the timeline, we have the pineapple discrepancy. This piece of evidence is critical for forensic experts trying to pin down the actual time of death.
The autopsy revealed undigested pineapple in JonBenét's stomach. When a medical examiner finds undigested food, it means the person consumed it shortly, perhaps within an hour or two before death.
Right. Which would have placed her last meal late that night, well after the family returned from the neighborhood Christmas party.
Yet, the Ramseys claimed JonBenét hadn't eaten anything since the Christmas party earlier that evening. This creates a significant direct contradiction regarding the time of death and the activities inside the home in those final hours.
And the evidence related to the pineapple sharpens the focus on the family. A bowl of pineapple was found in the kitchen.
And it contained both Patsy's and Burke's fingerprints.
So if JonBenét ate that pineapple, and the forensic evidence says she did, it means the family's statement about the timeline of her last meal was incorrect.
Right, and it means the crime happened shortly after an internal family event, the consumption of pineapple, creating a prime window of opportunity before the alleged intruder scenario could have taken place. The pineapple becomes a key piece of the RDI theory.
So we have a contradictory note and a contradictory timeline of the final hours. To return to the institutional complexity you highlighted, we need to introduce the lesser-known but absolutely vital truth from 1999 that fundamentally changed our understanding of the investigation: the unsealed grand jury action.
This truth remained sealed and secret until 2013, and when it emerged, it shocked the legal community and the public. We learned that a grand jury actually voted to indict John and Patsy Ramsey.
Let's clarify what that means. A grand jury heard the evidence, the note, the pineapple, the lack of forced entry, the crime scene contamination, and a majority of their members believed there was probable cause to charge them.
They were not just suspected. A jury of their peers found sufficient evidence to recommend charges of child abuse resulting in death and accessory to a crime.
This is a huge distinction that many people still miss. The police and the grand jury were indeed leaning RDI, supporting the theory of an internal cover-up. But here is the massive twist of institutional discord. DA Alex Hunter refused to sign the indictment.
Why would a prosecutor refuse to act on the will of the grand jury? I mean, that seems counterintuitive.
It comes down to that distinction we touched on earlier: legal standards. The grand jury operates on a standard of probable cause. Do we think a crime might have been committed and these people might have done it?
Okay.
Hunter, as the chief prosecutor, had to look ahead to the trial, where the standard shifts to beyond a reasonable doubt, a much, much higher legal bar.
And given the devastating contamination of the crime scene and the ambiguity of the note, Hunter stood firm that he lacked the evidence to secure a life-changing, unanimous conviction against John and Patsy Ramsey.
So you have the justice system just cleaved in two. One side believed the evidence pointed internally towards the family covering up a crime, but the prosecutor felt that due to the initial investigative failures, the physical evidence was too ambiguous to secure a conviction in a public courtroom.
And this paralysis, it ensured the case remained stuck, forever feeding that vacuum filled by public speculation.
And that leads us perfectly into the impact this vacuum had, because this case wasn't just solved or unsolved in a courtroom, it was processed by the public, making it the perfect laboratory for sociological and psychological analysis.
What's fascinating is how quickly the tragedy became spectacle. The sources are clear. This case didn't just participate in the trial by media, it birthed the modern template for the 24-hour news cycle.
It was revolutionary. Suddenly, cable news programs like Larry King Live became virtual courtrooms. This created a collective detective mindset where the public felt they had ownership of the case.
Everyone was analyzing Patsy's demeanor, scrutinizing the 911 call transcripts, or debating the handwriting on the note, often with the same level of authority as the actual investigators.
It truly democratized suspicion, didn't it?
It did.
Trust in official narratives was rapidly eroded because the media was constantly feeding the public leaks and partial, often contradictory theories from anonymous sources or rival investigators.
The source material compares the initial frenzy to the O.J. Simpson trial, but notes a crucial difference in the outcome.
The OJ trial, for all its controversy, had a legal proceeding that centered the national discussion, even if the verdict was deeply polarizing. The Ramsey narrative, however, was all pre-trial, all speculation.
Right. There was no legal resolution to ever center or definitively correct the story. The narrative remained eternally open-ended, allowing for continuous, unchecked media conjecture, creating an industry around the mystery.
And what fueled that conjecture, perhaps more than anything else, was the highly visible class rift and distrust. The Ramseys were not an average family. They were successful, affluent, and they immediately retreated behind a sophisticated wall of powerful legal and public relations teams.
And that response was sociologically profound. It immediately fed the narrative that wealth can buy silence, and that elite institutions and legal mechanisms were protecting their own.
It became an us versus them dynamic of class and privilege in the media. Supporters saw a grieving, victimized family being persecuted by an incompetent local police force, but critics saw wealth actively evading responsibility and justice. The sources make it clear that the media amplified both narratives, depending on the network, turning the case into a reflection of economic anxieties.
The case tapped into something incredibly deep in the American psyche, something essential about how we handle unexpected tragedy. The sources introduced two key psychological concepts here that help explain the public's enduring fascination and emotional investment.
The first is the just world hypothesis. This is a profound psychological need the public has to believe that the world is fundamentally a just and orderly place, and that bad things don't happen randomly to good people. Therefore, a horrific crime must have a reason.
And how does that apply to the Ramsey case specifically?
The alternative, that a random monster can violate a locked, affluent home in a safe neighborhood, commit a brutal crime, and leave no trace, is too terrifying for society to accept.
Yeah, that's a nightmare.
It is. If we accept the random intruder theory, it means our safety is an illusion, regardless of our wealth or neighborhood. Therefore, the internal solution, that the parents did it or the brother did it, is psychologically preferable because it restores order to the universe.
So we can say they brought it upon themselves through negligence or corruption, which allows us to feel safer in our own homes.
Exactly. It's about restoring the illusion of control.
And the second concept relates directly to the overwhelming and continuous attention the case received internationally.
That is missing white woman syndrome. The Ramsey case acted as a sociological catalyst for this phenomenon, receiving disproportionate and continuous coverage because the victim was young, white, and upper middle class. The classic perfect victim that resonates with media executives and a certain demographic of viewers.
So by focusing intensely on that specific image, the sequined, blonde, innocent child, the media amplified the tragedy far beyond what might be expected for other victims of similar crimes.
It reinforces cultural biases about whose innocence is deemed most valuable and, crucially, most profitable for the news cycle. This links back to the commodification issue. Her image was instantly a valuable product.
So the case didn't just break the news cycle, it weaponized our internal biases, our class resentments, and our psychological need for order, guaranteeing its status as a permanent, open-ended mystery tried only in the court of collective opinion.
Yes.
Now we arrive at the central conflict, the actual theories attempting to solve the crime. Nearly 30 years later, all experts are generally split into two primary camps. IDI, the intruder did it, and RDI, the Ramseys did it. Let's look at the specific, hard evidence that underpins each of these competing narratives.
We'll start with the intruder theory, IDI. This view has powerful, credible backers, including respected figures like Detective Lou Smith, who famously resigned from the investigation because he felt the police were too fixated on the family, and FBI profiler John Douglas.
So what evidence do they rely on? What's the core of their argument?
Their foundation rests on the most important piece of physical evidence in the IDI camp: minute traces of male DNA. This trace material was found commingled in JonBenét's underwear and on the waistband of her pants.
And for IDI proponents, this is definitive proof of an unknown male presence, an intruder who was involved in the crime.
Correct. And Detective Smith also highlighted certain physical signs that suggested an entry point, despite the Ramseys claiming the house was locked.
What were those?
He pointed to a hidden basement window that was allegedly broken or unlatched, with a suitcase placed beneath it, suggesting a possible entry or exit route for a small person. He also mentioned unexplained footprints in the snow outside the home, though that specific evidence was later contested or deemed too inconclusive to use in court.
So the conclusion for this camp is pretty clear. An unknown predator, a pedophile or stalker, entered the home after the family returned from the party, committed the murder, and attempted to stage it to look like a kidnapping, purely to confuse the investigation.
And maybe choosing the $118,000 ransom demand based on assumptions of the family's wealth?
Okay. Conversely, we have the family theory, RDI, supported strongly by the initial Boulder police investigation and former DA investigator Steve Thomas, who also resigned, but because of the institutional paralysis.
The RBI camp leans almost entirely on the staging theory. They argue the crime scene was a calculated, albeit panicked, attempt to create the illusion of an outsider.
And the belief here is that Patsy Ramsey accidentally caused the death, perhaps in a moment of rage related to an event like bedwetting, which would link back to the finding of urine stains on the bed.
And then with John, she frantically staged the entire scene to protect themselves and their surviving son, Burke.
What do they use to support the staging theory? I mean, it has to be more than just suspicion of the parents' behavior.
Oh, it is. Multiple points converge. Firstly, the lack of forced entry. The doors and windows appeared secured from the inside, meaning if someone came in, they knew how to unlock and relock a door without breaking it. Secondly, the physical evidence found inside the house that pointed back to the Ramseys, the use of Patsy's notepad and pen for the ransom note, and the pineapple found in the kitchen, connecting the timeline internally.
The note itself is key to this theory. While handwriting experts have been split, the note's incredible similarity to Patsy's handwriting is a major factor for RDI proponents. If the note was written by the mother, the entire intruder theory collapses.
Absolutely. And within the RDI camp, we have the most controversial position, the explosive Burke did it variant.
This theory, which has been widely popularized in media, suggests that the 9-year-old brother Burke caused the craniocerebral trauma, the severe head injury, perhaps accidentally in a fit of sibling rivalry, maybe over the pineapple.
And the parents, witnessing the potentially fatal consequences of the injury, then staged the strangulation, the ransom note, and the cover-up to protect their surviving child.
It's a dark theory based on circumstantial behavioral analysis. And it is vitally important, I think, for our listeners to note that this specific variant, which was popularized in a 2016 documentary, resulted in a successful defamation lawsuit against CBS by Burke Ramsey, who maintained his innocence.
Which highlights the real-world harm of speculation when it lacks direct, conclusive evidence.
And that brings us to the centerpiece of contention, the one element that gives hope and simultaneously causes immense frustration: the DNA labyrinth, a Rosetta Stone or red herring.
This is the most complex piece of evidence, and we need to spend some time on the technical aspects. The DNA found on JonBenét's clothing is often referred to as touch DNA.
Which means it is minute, likely shed skin cells, not bodily fluids.
Right. And it is also a mixture.
What does a mixture mean in forensic terms?
When we say mixture, we mean the DNA profile contains markers from 3 or 4 different sources, making separation incredibly difficult. It's like trying to find a specific needle in a haystack. But that haystack has already been walked through by dozens of people, each carrying their own microscopic bundles of hay, and those bundles are all piled together.
So in 1996, this type of minuscule mixed sample was almost unusable.
Almost completely. Yet it was this evidence that led to a dramatic and controversial development in 2008.
That's right. Former DA Mary Lacy controversially took the step of publicly exonerating the entire Ramsey family based on the touch DNA evidence. She declared they were no longer suspects,
claiming that the male DNA profile found on the victim's clothing proved an unknown male was the killer.
But the skepticism from later Boulder DAs and police is profound. They argue that the DNA is so minute and ambiguous that it could be contamination.
Contamination is the key word here. Forensic experts have long argued that this minuscule DNA could have come from the clothing factory workers during manufacturing, or from later handling by crime lab technicians who weren't using modern anti-contamination protocols.
So its highly fragile nature makes it too ambiguous for conclusive linkage to the act of murder itself.
So what one side sees as the key to freedom, a definitive intruder marker, the other side sees as a potential flaw in the evidence chain, a tiny anomaly that could be explained by mundane factory conditions or poor police procedure. It's the ultimate double-edged sword.
And this ambiguity is why we must mention the third way theory before moving on. Not everything is strictly IDI or RDI.
Right. This theory, posited by experts like forensic pathologist Dr. Cyril Wecht, attempts to reconcile the internal evidence with the presence of an outsider.
How does that work?
The theory suggests the killer was someone known to the family but not an immediate member, perhaps a house guest, a maintenance worker, or an acquaintance with knowledge of the home layout and the family schedule. Critically, this person would have had knowledge of John's specific $118,000 bonus.
So it addresses the intimacy required for the note, but avoids blaming the parents directly.
Exactly. It is a less popular but academically sound approach to resolving the contradictions.
We've established that the case is a forensic, institutional, and sociological failure, but we have to ask. So, what does this all mean for us today as consumers of true crime and as a society hoping for justice? Let's turn to the case's enduring legacy and its ethical implications.
The JonBenét Ramsey case is universally recognized as the definitive primordial ancestor of the true crime industrial complex.
It created the blueprint for everything that followed. The intense media saturation proved the insatiable public appetite for serialized, deep dives into unresolved mysteries, particularly those involving photogenic victims and deeply ambiguous evidence.
I mean, without the Ramsey case fueling decades of speculation, you don't get the cultural resonance of audio investigation shows like Serial or the deep dive aesthetic of Making a Murderer. It was the case that taught the media how to serialize tragedy indefinitely.
But the technology of 1996 could not keep up with the public demand for answers. That's why the case is now a test subject for modernizing the cold case in the age of the genealogist.
We are talking about investigative genetic genealogy, or IgG.
This is the technology that uses minute degraded DNA samples to build family trees by searching public genealogy databases. It successfully solved decades-old mysteries like the Golden State Killer case. The Boulder Police Department is now under immense public and technological pressure to use this method.
As of 2025, investigators have confirmed they are retesting the limited resource DNA from the crime scene, specifically targeting that 50-50 mixture found on the victim's clothing. This is the last great definitive hope for physical evidence resolution.
So if IgG can link that minuscule touch DNA to a distant relative in a public database, the case breaks wide open. It could potentially identify the unknown male mentioned in the 2008 exoneration.
It transforms the contamination issue from a technical roadblock into a high-stakes search.
Exactly. And if that DNA is conclusively linked to an individual outside the family, it will rewrite the entire history of the investigation, forcing society to confront the implications of 30 years of public and police fixation on John and Patsy.
The case also provides a fascinating cultural critique, especially when viewed internationally.
How so?
The sources mention that in European media, the case is often viewed less as a whodunit and more as a stark, somewhat peculiar window into American culture. Specifically, the intensity of child beauty pageants, the highly adversarial nature of the legal system, and the media's carnival-like treatment of tragedy.
So it becomes a critique of the facade of the American dream and the darkness that can lurk behind wealth. Finally, we must extract the critical, lasting lesson, the cautionary tale for justice. This case provides a definitive summary of investigative and ethical failures that changed police procedure forever.
It is used globally in criminology as a case study in how not to secure a crime scene. That initial, devastating failure to cordon off the house allowed the primary evidence to be corrupted within hours, crippling every subsequent forensic analysis.
And the delayed, non-systematic search for the body, which was found 7 hours after the 911 call, is a glaring example of a lack of investigative urgency. This botched legacy ensures that the case remains historically significant for all the wrong reasons.
And the greatest danger, the ethical weakness the case exposes, is the commodification of a child's death.
Absolutely. JonBenét, the child, became a product sold by networks, authors, and documentary makers. The public's desire for a satisfying, clean narrative, whether IDI or RDI, has constantly overridden respect for facts and the victim's dignity.
And the proliferation of accusatory theories, often without conclusive evidence, demonstrates the real-world harm of unchecked public speculation. The focus shifted irrevocably from justice for the little girl to the entertainment value of the puzzle.
This case endures because it's a gothic horror story set in a sun-drenched, affluent Colorado home. It combines our deepest, most primal fears, the violation of the home, the loss of a child, with our most persistent fantasy of being the one detective who cracks the code.
And its significance lies precisely in its unresolved nature. In a modern world that craves closure and defined narratives, it denies us both. It forces us to sit with ambiguity, to question authority, and to confront the unsettling possibility that the truth may be locked away forever, regardless of how advanced our technology becomes.
The future this case points to is one where every major crime becomes a public, digital cold case, tried continuously in the court of collective opinion long after official files are closed. we have, in a way, learned to love the uncertainty.
And that leads us to the haunting question that the sources suggest we must confront as a society, particularly as we move into the age of genomic sequencing. The technology we now have may finally provide the answer, but society will have to reckon with the meaning of that answer.
The future outcome, via genomic sequencing, may force us to confront a terrifying binary. Either we spent 30 years persecuting and agonizing a grieving family for a crime committed by a random intruder, or we must confront the terrifying limits and darkness hidden within the confines of the perfect family unit. That is the ultimate, enduring ambiguity.
The case leaves us with this central philosophical question. In our relentless pursuit of an answer, have we lost sight of the little girl at the center of it all?
That is the deep dive for today. Thank you for joining us in examining the architecture of an American myth.